Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinsey. I'm a security researcher with Varonis, and today we have a very special guest on, Jonty, aka Seytonic. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So if any of our guests have never heard of you before because they've been living under a rock, of course, then how might they know you, or what is it that you do that they might be interested in?
Sure. So I create hacking-related content on YouTube. Nowadays, it's more so news stuff. I also have a store, Maltronics, which sells mainly HID-related hardware hacking equipment. So, yeah, my whole, I guess, story wasn't really planned. I've just kind of fallen into it, and it's a bit of a mess. But
So we have a lot in common in that we both created YouTube channels, and those YouTube channels attracted a pretty good community around them, which kind of led to more and more engagement and then more stuff. So you've gotten a lot of attention for some of the devices that you've created, and we're going to talk about some of those today because the Malduino W, which is really cool and exciting, is also based on the open source project, the Wi-Fi Duck, which we've been getting a lot of attention on our channel for the last week or so because one of our videos featuring the Wi-Fi Duck has suddenly shot up in attention and has gotten, I think, over 172,000 views and lots of comments over that last week. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the Wi-Fi Duck / the Malduino W, what it is and why people are so interested in it. And also we wanted to, of course, plug Seytonic's YouTube channel if you haven't heard of it, because along with Nullbyte, Hack5, it's one of those great channels out there for you to get started with cybersecurity and hacking if you're a beginner and you want to find some exciting and cool projects. So you should definitely check it out if you've never heard of it before or if you're not a current subscriber. So the video that I'm talking about today was one of the first videos that we uploaded, and it's just titled Hacking Computers from Blocks Away with a Wi-Fi Duck. And if we could possibly switch over to my screen, this has gotten 240 comments, which is, even for my videos, like kind of an unusual amount of interaction. And this is kind of an even split between people who think this is a really cool attack and people who hate this attack and think it's lame. So we have people in the chat that are, actually, there was one, okay, I do have to admit, Jonty, there was one absolutely sick burn in these comments that just rose to the top. Let me read this. You're more likely to guess someone's banking details correctly the first time than find a Linux user outside.
oof.
Ouch.
I mean,
Ouch. That
part of me
is,
struggles to disagree.
right? I was just like, that's not... All right. It's like, are you really going to find a Linux user sitting in a coffee shop? Probably not, unless the coffee shop is like underground or at a hackerspace. So yeah, okay. Simon Wilson, that was a sick burn, and I acknowledge that, yes, if we used a Windows or a Mac OS computer, it might have been slightly more believable for our coffee shop scene. But for anybody who hasn't seen this, we basically go through what the sort of attack looks like, the fact that these are designed to look like regular USB sticks, the fact that if you are at a coffee shop and you have one of these devices, you can just plug it into someone's computer, and you can, it's playing. You can plug it into someone's computer, and you can use a wireless network adapter with an antenna to connect to it remotely from an attacker's machine. Now, this diagram is also hilarious because one of the comments was pointing out that this antenna is facing the wrong way. But our production manager wasn't a Wi-Fi guy, so that's all right. I mean, technically, this little port is where you would plug in the antenna or plug in the cable, and then like it would go that way. So our bad. Definitely not going to get great reception if you face the Yagi antenna perfectly away from the Wi-Fi Duck or the Malduino W. But this is the general concept. You can, from a distance, control a computer. Now, we also have a breakdown of the parts you need to do an open source, extremely ugly but functional version of this product. And it really requires just a couple components: a D1 Mini and a SparkFun Pro 1. SparkFun Pro Micro or equivalent board. We did this in a coffee shop to demonstrate that it was viable. I walked up, I stuck the Wi-Fi duck into this computer, and then Michael from about a block away was able to remotely control it and rickroll the person who was the victim. So all in all, I thought it was a pretty straightforward demonstration, but lots of people are saying that this is worthless garbage trash because you have to have physical access to the machine in order for it to work. Jonty, do you care to respond to that? Because it seems like they're challenging the usefulness of all HID attacks at once.
I mean, I suppose there's some truth in that. I mean, whenever you look at major hacks, they all tend to be done via something like spear phishing or something to that extent. But I think there's something really cool about the fact that the USB rubber ducky and the concept of the bad USB has been around for so long, and this adds kind of a new modern flair to it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why it's taken off quite a bit. And sure, there'll be the naysayers, but it's got 172K views, so people obviously like it.
Okay, so some of the things I'm also seeing that people are criticizing about this is like, they're just like, listen, bro, if the computer's on the table, just friggin' take it. I was like, all right, man, if the computer's open, you might as well just sit behind it for 10 minutes and just type away and do whatever. I was like, well, no, not exactly. Like, the point of this tool is you can eyeball a computer from across the room, see what operating system it's running, and then without pre-programming this thing, plug it into that computer, and then over Wi-Fi, tell the device which malicious script to run. And then you can also do all this as part of a two-person team, like we showed on the stream, where basically like one person has the job of just plugging it in and not looking suspicious, and somebody up to a mile away can do all the rest of the operation, establish a backdoor on the computer, and do whatever you want. So instead of one person who's desperately trying to like, you know, do everything themselves, you can have one person plug it in and get away with the device without causing any suspicion, and the second person actually running the tool. Or alternatively, if you're in an environment like an office or somewhere that has computers with USB ports that are not easily seen or are not immediately obvious, this is a great tool that you could plug into the back of a computer during a pen test or something, and then later on use a directional antenna to connect back to the computer and launch a backdoor. You can even, with a little bit of modification, do things like use these sorts of tools as like a mouse jiggler, so you can keep a computer awake, or even just like type in a character every so often to prevent a computer from locking. So these have a lot of application beyond just, you know, our one example of plugging it into someone's computer at a coffee shop. But in general, the other thing that I love is like, who in their right mind would get up from their computer while at a coffee shop? It's just like, well, at a coffee shop, you drink coffee. That makes you have to pee. Like, what? Like, some people lock down their computer, put it in their bag, and take it with them into the bathroom every time they go. But other people, like, don't want to lose their spot and will just leave their computer there if they feel like there's enough people around that reasonably no one's going to steal their computer. Because really, that's what people are worried about, stealing their computer. No one thinks that like someone's going to sit down at your computer the whole time you're in the bathroom, like, because that would be super weird and alarming. Like, most people are just worried, like, is my computer going to get stolen? So I just think like a lot of the criticism here is just like, when would you ever see a computer unattended? I see computers unattended constantly, whether they're desktops, laptops, like there are unattended computers all the time. And the only thing between somebody like actively exploiting that and not is having a tool that can quickly adapt to, you know, whatever situation you find yourself in, like a Mac OS computer left unattended for 3 to 5 minutes in a coffee shop. Could you take advantage of that with a Malduino W or a Wi-Fi duck? Like, absolutely. All you would need to do is plug it in and trigger the appropriate script, and you've got access to the computer. So physical access is a big deal, and that's why we keep, you know, creating HID tools that take advantage of it. And one thing that I think is, some people were really impressed by the fact that I plugged in the Wi-Fi duck with some fishing line attached to it, so from across the room I could just tug it out if I saw the person coming. And some people thought it was the dumbest thing ever. They're like, very clandestine. You only had one 1.5 foot strand of hair attached to a little Wi-Fi device. You should be a spy. Crying emoji. So like, you know, it really, like, it worked. You know, like if somebody was taking a bathroom break and I did have this device and I did deploy it in this fashion, I could have somebody who knows exactly what they want to do, creating a backdoor and actively interacting with the computer from a distance while I sit there and scope out the situation and make sure we don't get caught. Super easy to do, and honestly, it was not that challenging to stage. So,
oh yeah, I mean, just to add on that, a lot of people, when they leave their computer, maybe to go to the bathroom or to, refill their coffee, they'll probably maybe even lock their computer. So simply plugging in a generic bad USB isn't really going to work all the time. So having something you can just stick in and then wait till that's unlocked and ready to go, I think is really valuable.
I here's okay. So now we have somebody who hates this tool, thinks it's immoral to create, and has developed a defense. Amazing, developing cool tools that let you he a thief, not caring about what damage can do an individual. I think I'll rig a USB port to explode like a die pack. So you heard it here first, hackers. Watch out. There are some people out there who are rigging their USB ports to explode with the die pack. So if you're in a coffee shop, you got your Wi-Fi duck, the guy looks at you, gets up, goes to the bathroom. It could be a trap. You could end up covered in blue ink. So just be careful.
Where have you found all these cynical viewers from? I mean,
I
do a lot of
don't
videos
know.
on this kind of thing, but I never get these kind of cynical comments.
Yeah, like I think that because it's blowing up, we really made this to kind of like appeal to regular people who may not have ever seen this sort of attack before. And like we really wanted them to be thinking like, hey, like do I ever leave my computer unattended? Like do I have like USB ports that are just like wide open? And it seems like most people think that they're perfect at security and would never ever do this. So it's pretty evenly split between like people who want one of these and people who think that this is not hacking. Now I even had someone who went through and said, oh, this is my favorite comment. All right, get ready, you guys. Hack means that you do things without being at the target computer. If you need to plug something physically in, it is not a hack. This is a trick. If you have direct access to the computer in the first place, what do you need to have a visible external drive when you can install any type of remote controlling software? So this guy is like, listen, if there's an unattended computer at a coffee shop, sit your ass down behind it. None of these fancy tools to make things faster. None of this automatic exploitation. We don't want to use a browser to control it. This is a trick. So, like I have people in our community redefining the word hack to like mean exactly what they mean in that one specific instance. Of course, that is not what hack means. Hack just means you're using something in a way other than what it was intended for, and that is exactly what we're doing. So,
yeah,
all right.
I can't understand where it's coming from on that. Usually I can kind of understand where people are, their perspective, but that kind of just goes right over my head.
And here we go. The prevailing, who leaves their laptop alone? So we've ignited a bit of a controversy when it comes to, I guess, this particular video. And good. Like, I think that people should have this debate. If it is normal to not leave your laptop unattended, I wouldn't have a job, and you probably wouldn't sell many Malduino Ws. So we do know for a fact that this is something that happens all the time, and this is something that is a big problem in security. So human interface device attacks are very common. One of my first human interface devices was a Hack5 rubber ducky. And then I graduated from that to a SparkFun, no, not a SparkFun, a DigiSpark. And the reason I did that was because they were smaller, cheaper, easily programmable. I could change which device the computer thought it was when I plugged it in. And the only issue was you had to reprogram this thing for every attack, or just carry like a keychain of them with different exploits loaded on them, because there was no good way to switch between payloads. So, Jonty, I feel like this might be a good opportunity to explain how the Malduino W came about and why it's a huge improvement on something like, like a DigiSpark board. Because, you can use the DigiSpark board to plug it into a computer, run a bunch of scripts really quickly, maybe establish a backdoor, do a prank or whatever. But what are the limitations of like a DigiSpark, and why is the Malduino W so much better?
Sure. So I think the DigiSpark, it's got very limited memory, so you can't put massive scripts on it, and that's a big downside in of itself. Another thing with the DigiSpark is, of course, once it's programmed, to reprogram it, you need a way to stop it executing its script when you plug it back in, and I'm sure you've dealt with this, so you could always solder a button or that kind of thing, but it adds a lot of friction. So the Malduino W is essentially just an evolution of the Malduino, which is essentially electrically the same as a SparkFun Pro Micro, but just with a set of switches and a micro SD. So it doesn't really, it's not a massive innovation, but it just takes the DIY concept and it makes it infinitely easier and simpler to use. So the Malduino W is the evolution of that, in that there's no SD card and it has a proper case this time. We worked on that. So instead of loading the scripts onto a TXT file, sticking that SD card into the device, instead you connect to the device's Wi-Fi hotspot, and then you can edit the scripts, and you can store a whole load of scripts on the device itself, so you don't need to continually switch them out. And then once the device is plugged in, you can just connect to its Wi-Fi hotspot and then press run on each and every script at will, essentially. So it basically just removes a lot of the friction that you have with an SD card and a set of switches, and it kind of brings it more so into the 21st century.
I love it. Yeah, like, so the kind of workflow as a hacker who wants to do a human interface device attack would be something like this usually. If we were working with like, I guess some tool that is just a community-based open source tool, you would have like maybe like a DigiSpark. You would be like, okay, this is a Mac OS system, so you'd have to come up with a Mac OS script. Then you need to change the signature of the DigiScript to read like a Mac OS keyboard, because otherwise a pop-up's going to come up and ruin your day. You're going to have to flash all of that using Arduino IDE after writing the code to a little device and then plug it in, and it will run the same code every time without stopping, and there's very little you can do to control that. The step up from that would be like the original Malduino, where it gives you the ability to select which payload you want to run. You can like do more things in advance and select more, like for example, like which operating system payload you want to run, as opposed to just having a device that's only capable of doing one thing. So that's like a step up. You can get it ready for a variety of different engagements, but there's still the limitation that you can't interact with it live. You have to pre-program it. You have to look ahead a little bit and plan for an engagement. Now, what I love about the Malduino W, the Wi-Fi duck as a community project is you don't need to do that much planning. Like if you find yourself in a situation where there's an open USB port and you plug this in, you can connect to it and either write a script live that you're just coming up with right then, or you can run any number of scripts you have saved. So it gives you the flexibility to, at a moment's notice, be able to select which script you want to run after you've plugged it into the target. And that's just not something that was possible before, because it was kind of like a fire and forget weapon. Like it's programmed in advance, you send it off into the universe, and you can't interact with it after that. This has changed now, and I think that that is a really major evolutionary improvement of this, is that you can trigger script after the fact. And I was working on as well some different bash script you can do to instantly trigger a script as soon as the device's Wi-Fi comes up. So if you're worried about speed, you can be like, all right, I want to run like a Mac OS script. You can start running a bash script on your computer that continually looks for the Wi-Fi network that the Malduino W creates when it is plugged into the target, and then you can instantly send that script as soon as it's connected, even if you haven't programmed it to do so before, and if you don't want to spend the time going through the web interface to select it manually. So you can do scripting with this device, which is super cool. You can do on-the-fly payload writing, which is super cool, and you can store payloads and run them however you want in whatever order you want via the web interface, which again, of course, works on like, cell phones and stuff. So if you just find yourself with a cell phone and one of these devices, you can very easily, plug it in, access the interface, and start doing stuff with it. You do not need a computer to actually get started using the Malduino W or the Wi-Fi duck. So I love that. I think that that is probably the best feature in that you don't need to perfectly plan out your engagement, and like have it programmed for that specific engagement for this tool to be useful. Because before, it really wasn't useful if you hadn't already pre-programmed it with a script, and you just found yourself in a room with an open computer, but you don't have your laptop to start like flashing this device again.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's always going to be the low-level hackers who want to have complete control over everything. I would much rather use DIY versions, DIY systems that, if anything, just for a sense of satisfaction, that they've built it themselves. But with the Malduino W, it was trying to take that concept and then turn it into something that's useful to the majority of people who maybe aren't as involved on the low-level things. So they don't want to spend ages reprogramming or soldering buttons or that kind of thing. So it acts as a bit of a gateway drug and makes things a lot easier for them.
All right, so one thing I want to talk about is what you've done is taken this community project that, as I said, looks horrifying, and you've made it actually look like something that you wouldn't be that upset to find plugged into your computer. Like, it actually looks like a normal USB stick, and I have to believe that that was not easy. If we could switch over to my screen for a second, I want to show the version of the project we created for our demo is just these like two soldered together boards on like with a PCB in the middle. And again, it looks scary. If you saw this sticking out of your computer, it's really obvious that something nefarious is happening. Like, it looks like there's maybe some sort of like electric shock danger. Like, no, like as a layperson, this is not a normal thing to have sticking out of your computer. And if you were like in a coffee shop or something, having this stuck out of your computer, programming it, people would look at you because it looks like you're doing some weird stuff. I mean, this objectively looks like a malicious, sketchy device, especially if you're not expecting to see it in your computer. So I feel like in terms of like being subtle or trying to trick someone into plugging one of these things in, you have about a 0% chance of getting a normal person to ever plug in one of these devices ever. Now,
Oh yeah, it's not going to happen.
yeah. I mean, it just looks sketchy. It just looks
And
bad.
that's on the better side of things. When it comes to DIY versions, that's one of the much cleaner looking DIY versions. Whereas I did a video a couple of years back on one, and it just looks like a rat's nest cake. It looks even more horrifying.
Yeah, I've seen some people try to cram these into like a calculator too. So you just have like a semi-normal calculator on the front and just wires coming out of the backside. I'm like, oh my god. So yeah, it's like you can make this do-it-yourself project in a lot of different ways that are not beautiful. But I want to contrast this now that you have the image in your mind with this beautiful USB drive. So this is the Malduino W, and as you can see, this is a really, really elegant piece of hacking gear compared to the slap together project that is the community edition Wi-Fi duck. So Jonty, could you explain a little bit about like what it took to get this product actually to look like this, to look like something that is not going to get you immediately flagged as being suspicious just for using it?
Sure. So I suppose the biggest challenge we found was USB cases. There's a real lack of supplies when it comes to standard looking USB cases. You go on, you have a look at China and the USB cases you can buy from China, and you ask for catalogs from these manufacturers. And all of their USB sticks have really weird shapes. Like, you'll have USB sticks that look like guitars, like boats, like funny hats. To find something that looks at the very least semi-normal was it took a number of weeks, I'll be honest.
That's amazing.
But once we found this, and it had dual USB A and C, which is more so by accident. We weren't really planning on doing that, but it had both of them, so we figured, hey, might as well go with that. And yeah, so essentially we took so we're using a SAMD chip as opposed to the AtMega chips that you're using. But apart from that difference, it's pretty electrically similar in that it uses an ESP8266. So fitting it all in that space was one thing, but another thing is the Wi-Fi reception, because of course it's in a metal case, which is potentially slightly problematic. So I've got a very talented engineer, and he specifically tuned the antenna such that it took account of the fact that the case, whilst being metallic, is slightly thin, which is really good. It took account of the case being metallic, and it still gives really good range. So that took a bit of doing. But
man, I didn't even think that like you could finally, after like going through all the novelty case, you're like, finally a normal case. Oh, and it has USB Type A and Type C. All right, let's do it. And then you find out that it's also shielded.
Yeah, I mean,
like as a side
one of
effect,
the
like will
things
not
is,
allow any reception.
like a lot of these suppliers, like our supplier said this case is, I think he said it was aluminium, though aluminium is really bad for RF, though it doesn't perform that badly. So I think them saying it's aluminium is more so, false advertising, which a lot of these suppliers...
Which is good right now.
Oh yeah, no, which is great. But just getting that out is quite difficult. And the nice thing about this case was, of course, the metal bit you're seeing there is cut from a massive rod, so we could cut it to size and make it exactly the right size we wanted, which was another major bonus.
Okay, all right. So after you're done sorting through like the giant like clown shoe like USB cases and settled on one that like isn't alarming, you kind of ended up with this case that like it does not look, frankly, I mean, it just looks like like a nice USB stick that you would get that doesn't have any additional features. It really doesn't look like it would have Wi-Fi connection or anything else. Like, this looks very, very normal. Like, I would say, like, if you had this sticking out of your computer in a coffee shop, nobody would give you a second glance. And frankly, if this was sticking out of someone's computer, it doesn't immediately look like you need to call the FBI. Like,
Oh yeah, we made sure not to include any branding whatsoever on the physical device, specifically for that reason, just to make it look as normal as possible. And also, we have a couple LED, well, one LED in there, which takes advantage of the fact that the ends are transparent, which looks really cool. But that can, of course, be turned off, so it looks a lot more incognito.
Oh yeah, I see it in these photos. It looks very nice. Yeah, so that's really cool because like on one hand you might want to have it, you know, light up and just look like a normal USB drive just to know that it's working. But if you were doing something like, let's say that during a pen test you found a desktop computer that has an insecure USB port and you're left alone in the computer, in the room with the computer for a while. Well, you could probably just plug one of these into the back of the computer, but you would want to disable the lights to make sure that it wasn't causing a big flashing target for someone to realize that it wasn't supposed to be plugged in there. But if you were able to plug one of these devices into a computer like that, and then be able to get access to it from maybe outside that office, it would be a really interesting and persistent way to get remote access to a device that you maybe only have physical access to one time. So I don't know, I think that these are a really, really interesting evolution of the original project because, again, this is just going to blend in with all the other cables and stuff back there. It's not going to be as scary and confusing as finding a Wi-Fi duct in the giant like nest of stuff that's plugged into the back of your machine. Although I will say that I plugged in a Wi-Fi duct to Michael's computer for a full month and would just spawn calculators from doing that, and he thought I had established like a persistent backdoor, and he never checked to see if there was like some sort of physical backdoor access. So I will say, if you're looking to prank someone, even if you have like the absolutely ugly as hell version, it still seems like people just don't check this very often, and often they look for a much more complicated solution when like the most simple thing is that there's just something plugged into your computer that's making it freak out.
Oh yeah, and if you wanted to be really evil, you could plug one of these things in, but have it on an automatic timer, such that every 9 hours it would just restart someone's computer, or maybe something even more nefarious than that. I think that would be a great way to really confuse someone.
That's beautiful. I love it. So one question that I constantly have and forget, and people ask, and I'm going to ask you now is this capable of striking keys while a computer is restarting? Like, for example, to like change like a BIOS or like boot setting, if you know the way that works. Because a lot of people ask about that, and typically the answer is no, because like it has to be recognized by software as a keyboard.
That's a really good question. I've never actually been asked that, and unfortunately, I don't have a good answer. I suppose my guess would be that since it uses a generic keyboard drivers, I can't see any reason why it wouldn't work in a BIOS or something like that.
Interesting.
But that's a bit of an outside guess. I've never had someone ask me that, interestingly.
Yeah, when we've done the stream before, we've had a couple people be like, "Oh, sick! So can I just have it reboot the computer and then change the BIOS settings?" I'm like, I don't know, but that's really clever. So maybe we could try it out and see if it's actually possible to use like a Malduino W to like change BIOS settings or something like that, because it would be really interesting. I think it might have been a limitation on the DigiSpark, maybe, that wasn't able to be used that way. But maybe the Malduino W could, because that would be pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, we'll have to give that a go. I'm reasonably confident it would work. Again, it uses very generic drivers, so it'll work on Mac, Linux, Windows. It works on whatever, really. So I don't foresee a problem with that.
So I'm going also to the original Malduino just because I want to show it off. This is, it's kind of cool to see like how the evolution has happened from one to the other. It's like this one, it looks, oh wow. I also appreciate that you included the open pictures of just the board. It's so small. That's really cool.
This is actually newer than the W. This is, I guess, the evolution of the original Malduino Elite, which was much more bare bones and launched on Indiegogo. But this is essentially the Malduino Elite, if anybody's familiar with that. But it's in a really simple case. So it preserves the fact that you've got USB A and C, and of course it's got the micro SD slot. But it has a set of the switch can only allow 3 positions, which isn't 16 like the original Malduino, but it makes it a lot easier for people because it's a toggle switch. So it's a lot simpler.
Oh yeah, I can see right there. Yeah, so at least you get you can select 3 operating systems maybe, and then write a script for each one, and then it allows you to select which one you want to run before an engagement, which is nice.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to the various things you can do with the Malduino W, just because I still have a lot of ideas for connecting back or exfiltrating or doing other sorts of more interactive things now that there's a Wi-Fi connection involved. One of the first things I did a script for was actually forcing a Windows computer to join a Wi-Fi network that it's never joined before, so that you can effectively take over the data connection and force the computer to join a rogue network or something like that and start doing more interactive stuff. It's a little difficult to know what's happening on the computer when you can't see the screen. Oh my gosh, I have to tell you about a user request. So our production manager, Michael, would humbly like to ask you, Jonty, to please add the ability to see the screen. He says it would probably just be a relatively small fix, and it would just be much more useful if you could go ahead and just add that, please.
Sorry, see the screen on. So what
on the computer, yeah, on the computer that you plug the Malduino W into. If you could just make it so you could see the screen too, please, that would just be great. Thanks.
Oh, I got confused. I thought you were talking about the stream. I was like, wait, is my thing not showing that?
Oh no. No, Michael would just.
Yeah, no, that sounds really simple. I'm sure we can shoehorn that in.
Yeah, quick fix. We'll just send the screen over the Wi-Fi or whatever. It'll be fine.
Oh yeah, no, these things are really easy.
This was my exact reaction. I was just like, "Are you insane?"
Sadly, I suppose it's a double-edged sword really, because we're using Arduino, which is open source, so it makes it really easy for people to tinker with it. But it does mean we're a little bit limited in what we can do. So the original Malduino was using an app mega chip, which is an 8-bit microcontroller. This is an ARM chip, so it's 32-bit. So it has a bit more scope for things, but screen grabbing, maybe at some point, maybe we'll listen to this podcast back in 2 years and be laughing at how easy that was. So.
Yeah, right. Because if you really think about it, so when you're doing this attack, the one disadvantage you really have is that you cannot see the screen. You can't really see what's going on. So this is still in some ways like a fire and forget attack, because even if you're doing the attack live, it's quite difficult to see the screen unless you're right behind the screen watching it, which kind of defeats the purpose of using this unless it's purely for just the speed of injecting a script, which again, that's perfectly legitimate. If you just want to sit there, quickly inject a really long script or something else that would take too long to do manually, that's perfectly valid. But it feels like there's some other sneaky stuff you can do if you really wanted to see the screen. I just mentioned being able to force the computer to connect back to a different network. Well, if you wanted to do that and then maybe start either taking screenshots of the screen and sending it, or if you to maybe a computer on that new network that you just joined, or maybe if there's a fast way of establishing a screen sharing session, if there's already software installed, there's lots of different ways where you could get the image of the screen back across to another computer if you really wanted to, using the Malduino W. I mean, just by forcing it to join a man-in-the-middle network, or starting a service that's logging the screen and then sharing that. There are ways of doing this. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not. You can't plug it in and then have it become an HDMI source over Wi-Fi. That's just not going to work at the moment.
Yeah, no, sadly at the moment that's not possible. Though, you can access the print screen button via the Malduino. So if you were to press that and then somehow exfiltrate that, that's always a possibility. Though there's something that comes to mind is I actually get a lot of people using the Malduino for, they're system administrators. So they're not even hackers or anything. The reason they like the Malduino is that they can have a setup script on it, and then stick that into 100 laptops and just have them set up instantly without them having to fiddle with each one for 10 minutes. So I think that's little unheard of use of this kind of thing.
I have to say the Malduino W is basically like a Wi-Fi like copy and paste for me. Sometimes I'll be like, hey, I gotta send you this link. How do I send? Do you have Signal downloaded? No. Okay, just take this. They just plug it into their computer. I just connect to the browser and just paste whatever I wanted to send them, and it just types it onto their computer. It is the laziest use of a hacking tool, you guys, but it's actually super convenient. So like, you know, I'll do the same thing. Like if I have a computer that I need to configure or a bunch of Raspberry Pis where I need to do the same thing over and over, you know, I'll just load it up and then have a separate script on my computer that just connects to the Wi-Fi duck or the Malduino W and runs that script every time I plug it in automatically, which is really cool. So there's lots of different kind of like unusual uses for these devices. But I also wanted to, I noticed while I was clicking this that you also have some Wi-Fi keyloggers. Can you explain these? Because I actually don't have one yet and I'm jealous.
Sure. So a Wi-Fi keylogger is basically a passive tap of a keyboard. So you connect a keyboard into it, and then the other end goes into the PC itself, and then it will passively tap the keys that are transmitted, basically, and then you can retrieve those via a web interface. So it's a very no-frills kind of a thing, but it again, essentially, like with the Malduino and then the Malduino W, it takes the keylogger and then it adds Wi-Fi to it.
That's excellent. I really like that because you're kind of, depending on what you want to do to the computer, you've got a variety of different options here where if you just want to record keystrokes and look for passwords and stuff like that persistently, you know, I guess you like could use a Malduino W and you could install like keylogging software and have it connect back and whatever. But if you just want to do something really simple, there's also just a physical like hardware device you can plug in to do this as well. And I don't know, I feel like that might be a good subject for a video at some point because we haven't really covered them ever, like keyloggers on our show. And also, I was really impressed with your TikTok video where you were infinitely keylogging through a giant bridge of keyloggers. That was, I think, one of the better applications of just a massive amount of hacking tools that I've seen.
Oh yeah, not everyone has access to 15 keyloggers to just daisy chain them. But yeah, that was good fun. And some people, some people have even used the keyloggers for that they'll plug them into barcodes. So they can remotely, well, for example, in a shop, you might have a barcode, but it uses a USB connector. So you can plug the barcode scanner through the Wi-Fi keylogger and then retrieve the barcode that it scanned remotely.
What?
So for stock keeping, that kind of thing, some people use it for that. Oh, yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah.
That's so interesting. Okay, so I didn't even know that was a thing. So you can use this to then like wirelessly capture information from like devices with a USB interface, like a barcode scanner, and use it to like decode barcodes effectively.
Essentially, yeah, because the barcode scanner is basically just a keyboard to a computer.
What?
So, and there's even been some enterprise customers, when it comes back to Malduino, they've wanted some kind of solution where they can plug 20 Malduino Ws into all their computers and then just control them all remotely at the same time. So that's something I wasn't able to take them up on because we don't have that as a feature as of yet.
Well, it also just sounds like kind of a bad idea. Like it's one of those things where people's like, this is fantastic. I love this idea. In fact, let's scale it to the moon. And you're like, wait a minute. Like, as the person who made this, like, I'm not sure if you want to be doing that because you could have some unintended consequences. Like this is supposed to be like a hacking tool. It's not supposed to be like a secure enterprise like way of like accessing like computers that are like not supposed to be accessed by other people. So creating like essentially web backdoors to all of your computers without like having the product intended to be like a secure way of doing that is playing it a little fast and loose, huh?
Oh yeah, no, it's playing with fire, of course. I didn't really get that far with it because you know it can't do it, so I had to sadly turn it down. But now you mention it, that would be a bad idea.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things where when you first mention it, it seems like a great idea, and then the more you think about it, like you're like, wait, Wi-Fi has a mile range, and anybody can access? Maybe not. Maybe not. Especially because like standard Wi-Fi hacking and cracking and stuff like would apply. Like if you have these web interfaces that effectively give you access to like type into someone's computer, then properly securing those web interfaces and monitoring those endpoints is like you've just basically given yourself a whole bunch of like wireless endpoints you have to like monitor now because they have direct access to a bunch of important computers. So interesting, like high marks for creativity and laziness. That's my favorite thing is like we could install like GoToPC on this computer, or we could just do something crazy. I love that.
Yeah, there's definitely easier ways to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I never. They did offer to pay for the development of it. I didn't get too far as to ask them what that was, but might have been interesting to follow up.
Yeah, I love that like when these products get out there, you never really know like who's going to be using them and in what context. Like I know that Stefan had his product, had his Wi-Fi deauthor end up inside a 3D printed prize that was given out to like U.S. National Guard cyber students. So like when he set out to like create his product, he probably wasn't thinking of making like a challenge prize for like the like U.S. military, but you know that's where it ends up going. Like once the project gets out there and people get their hands on it.
I can one up you on that actually.
Please, oh please.
So I had I won't say which company it was, but recently they were doing a bit of some kind of competition within their company, and they're a company that does they make period tracking apps for women. And they want to give away Malduinos to their staff. So that was a confusing one. I don't know what they would. I don't know how that ties in. But
like because they're like security focused, or was it gonna
it.
like spring some sort of like menstruation related like thing on their computer when they plugged it in, or like there were no details?
No, I mean it's only just gone down, so only happened
Wow.
like a day or two ago. But I might ask them to see what the impetus was on that.
Yeah, no, it's great because it's like kind of lopsided on information. It's like a lot of like unrelated stuff that they do, and then a kind of murky like use case for this, like as to like why it would be necessary. But hey, it's great to have. I think it's one of those situations where like somebody in the group is just like, "This is the coolest thing ever. We have to use it," and everyone is like, "Okay, Rachel, like we'll use it. Like calm down." And then like they have
the customers that use the Malduino have really impressed me because recently, so I've been looking for businesses to put on my homepage, as in like our customers include, and then blah blah blah. So I went through everyone who has ever ordered, and then I filtered out all the generic email addresses. So I looked at businesses that had bought them, and I suppose I might not be allowed to say some of their names, but certain space exploration companies have bought them. So that was an interesting one.
There's a lot, so it's not clear like which one it would be.
Oh yeah, I mean there's one that springs to mind, but also the someone at the Tower of London bought one. The castle in central London, apparently they needed one for some reason, but
reasons, castle related business.
Yeah, no, of course, but yeah, no, the list of customers is really boggling sometimes. It's not because I did a survey recently of a bunch of customers. About 1,000 people responded just to understand who my customers were, and the vast majority of people, unsurprisingly, are students. So people who are more so hobbyists, they just kind of have I guess a passing interest in this thing, and that's what I mostly try to cater to. But yeah, there's always these outliers of more interesting businesses and people that buy them. And yeah, it's always interesting to find out.
So now that you have a couple different products that are out and doing pretty well, like what do you think is the next thing for your store? Like, do you have any ideas for the next product you're going to be releasing, or do you see anything that's particularly interesting that you think isn't quite served yet that you might want to make a product for in the near future?
So I think one of the really cool things about this sector is that there's really not much out there at all. So there's a million different things I could say that maybe we can make sync on this or that. But I think to flesh out the basics, so looking at some kind of Wi-Fi captive portal device, I guess similar to the Wi-Fi Pineapple, but not as fully fledged, would be really interesting. So there's a few more things I want to do on the HID aspect of things. But more so to grow some roots and break into some of the core hacking products that people use, as opposed to trying to make something really specialized that no doubt some of these products will spawn as children.
Yeah, one thing I think is interesting as well is there's some people who get into designing these sorts of Wi-Fi, or not Wi-Fi, but just hacking products in general, and they try to make it into like a platform that supports everything, and it'll have like 50 features, like 2 of which are useful, and like there's just like a lot of confusion as to like what does this thing do. One thing I really like about your products is they are extremely specific, and they're not trying to do like a bunch of different things like half well. They usually do like 1 or 2 things very specifically, very well, in a very thought out manner that makes it just really easy for beginners to get started doing whatever it is they're trying to do. So I just want to say, I appreciate that the kind of product focus that you've had in like making something straightforward in like how it's used, how it's like what it's for, as opposed to like, you know, like I'm not talking shit in any way, shape, or form, but like there are some products like I think like Flipper Zero is one of them that does like 25 things and all of them are great, but like I don't know if I'll ever see one because like the process of designing it is like super complicated and there's so many moving parts that it really becomes this huge effort. You know, like having a product that's affordable, like for students and people that just want to get started with this, straightforward, specific, like those are all things that make this a lot more accessible for beginners, because frankly, there are some security products out there, which I won't name, that are trying to do a lot of stuff and they end up just being confusing, and I find myself not touching them because like, you know, they don't really do what they advertise as well as they say they do. Your products do, because they're very specifically made for like one or a couple use cases, and they do that exceptionally well. So hopefully whatever your new products are will kind of continue that trend of making just like hacking concepts really accessible for anybody who wants to learn about HID attacks or wireless HID attacks or, you know, key logging attacks. Like, I don't know, I just think that's great. And that the fact that it's not like a $200 product that does like 15 things, like none of which are documented properly, is like very much a relief to me.
Thanks. And I think when it comes to making things that are more targeted, when it comes to hacking related products, it's maybe one of the few industries where you can really have your cake and eat it. But because people like gadgets, you know, in this field, we all have things. So if you had one thing that did everything, I almost feel like that would be a bit depressing. You know, I like having a kit or like a little bag or something that has, you know, 10 different things that I can, you know, talk about and use and mess with. I think it's just more fun. So I didn't really go for the targeted aspect to begin with. It was more so because I really don't know how to do everything. If I did, then, well, if I thought I did, then maybe the Malduino would be a lot more confused than it is now. But
or maybe it would still be in development.
Oh yeah, no, this is another big thing, because of course, you know, projects can stay in development for years. But just trying to get something out there as soon as possible is I try to make it a bit of an ethos.
Yeah, so I would like love to maybe have you come back sometime and show off some interesting like edge cases or things you can do with some of your products. Like I think that, you know, testing out to see if it can change like the boot order on a computer is like instantly something I want to try, because it sounds super cool and potentially very practical. But if there's any other like good demos or any other good things people would like to see, like please also shout out in the chat or let us know in the comments on the video if anybody would like to see some demonstrations of all the cool stuff you can do with either the Keylogger or the Malduino W or the original Malduino.
Yeah, no, I'll be happy to come back on anytime. And yeah, I'm always surprised to see what people come up with. And people tend to do a lot more interesting things that even I could come up with. So it's always cool to just keep an eye on my email inbox and see what people come at me with. Because some people have even written their university end-of-year theses on the Malduino. So that's always interesting to hear.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I just love that, like, when you put a product out there, like, people bring their self to it and are able to do so many different things that you never imagined as the creator. And, like, I would love to hear some more stories of just what other people have done with it and different surprises you've had, like bringing a product out into the world and seeing how, you know, hackers react to it when you actually get it in their hands. Although I imagine that the process of getting your store up, shipping all this stuff, getting it designed, getting it produced is also just a tremendous labor in and of itself.
Oh yeah, it's Okay, it's a whole rabbit hole just shipping something. Things always go wrong. There's a million moving parts in shipping stuff, especially internationally. So I almost feel like there's two separate whole industries in there. So yeah, for the next one, give me I'll do some more homework and flesh something out that's hopefully I can shed some light on.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be absolutely great. Well, if anybody wants to check out more of Jonty's work, you can always go to his TikTok, which is I would say his probably his best channel. But if you want to check out some of his other work, you can also go to maltronics.com or to his YouTube channel, which is Seytonic, and you can follow his work there as well as pick up one of his products that we featured today.
Awesome. Wow, that went quick. I almost feel like we just started.
Right? I know. It kind of always goes that way with these conversations. But I'd love to have you on again another time. And yeah, hopefully our guests can also come up with some interesting use cases that we might be able to try out, because I love getting fan suggestions. And it always feels kind of like vindicating when we're able to take like a really good one and like turn it into an episode. So if you're curious about seeing what we can do with one of these devices, or if you have an idea for a specific setup, let us know and we'd love to try it out. But thank you, Jonty, for coming on today and giving us some perspective on what it's like to create a hacker device for the hacking community and actually release it and see the community engage with it. It's super cool, and I think, I don't know, you might have inspired some people to maybe take on their own projects today.
Let's hope so. And I'll keep an eye on the comments on this. It's going to be on YouTube, right? So I'll jump in, and if anybody has any questions, I'll see if I can answer a few things.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you everyone for hanging out with us today. Again, if you want to follow Jonty, make sure to check out maltronics.com or Seytonic on YouTube. And if you want to catch more episodes like this or see the recording, you can also go to the SecurityFWD channel, that's SecurityFWD on YouTube, or check out hackingwithfriends.com. That's all we have for today. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.